Well, that did not take long. So apparently, Emily hath responded. So let me get the shilling out of the way real quick because this is a very difficult but spicy conversation. So please give the other channels a chance. Please consider supporting this channel via channel memberships as well as other means. So let us get into it. So let me lay out the very basic controversy and then get to Emily's response. Linkin Park is returning after a long hiatus, and they've hired new vocalist Emily Armstrong. Initially, the fans were very excited, and I gotta admit, hearing some of the work they were doing, she is a very good singer. It's a very peculiar vocal style. She is very talented, no doubt about that. But, and here's the dilemma, she's also a Scientologist, and not a recent convert. She's been in Scientology a very, very long time. So despite being a woman and being gay, apparently Scientology is for her. But then additionally beyond this, and again, we don't know if they're, quote, friends, but she did show up to support Danny Masterson in at least one court appearance. At least that's the way she's framing it. She only showed up once to support him early, but then later did not support him. It's a little problematic. So the way she's framing it is that I was asked to support a friend at a court appearance. I did that, but later I found out certain things. I no longer support Danny Masterson. And she goes all the way. She says, I do not support any abuse or violence against women, which I think is very telling. So apparently, if you're a man, so if you're a small child who's a man, or a young man who's a man, or even an old man who's a man, I guess if Scientology victimizes you, she really doesn't care. Well, how much of a Scientologist is she? Well, Cedric, the husband of one of Danny Masterson's victims, and I want to be clear, this victim is not exactly who she appears to be, but we'll get into that. So Cedric went online and said that he, or as he's alleging, he personally knows Emily and that they did a purif together. If you know Scientology, that's a purification ritual. So apparently she is very much into the church and its teachings, and he called out that apparently she has read a lot of the Hubbard books, and Hubbard was very homophobic. And yet, Emily is gay and proudly gay. She's openly gay. She's also openly a Scientologist. So, a lot of things are not adding up here. So, is this statement credible? Well, it just appears to be what it is. It's kind of propaganda. I mean, first of all, Danny Masterson, in his case, has been known, if you bother to really do research, the late 2000s, you would know roughly the outlines of the case. Granted, we know a lot more information. I don't know at what point you can claim ignorance. Like, I myself know a few Danny Masterson films. I've watched a few 70s episodes. But I think, like most people, I kind of know he's a minor Hollywood star. So I got to be honest, I really didn't know much about him. Like, Scientology, I knew. But in terms of what is going on with his career or his scandals, not really. So again, we have to remember Danny is a minor star. Again, a lot of people didn't know, but if you did care to know, again, a lot of facts emerged, at least in the late 2000s and early 2000 teens, I guess you want to call them, like 2010, 2011, 2012, given her timeline with Scientology, because she was born into it. She's a second gen. How could she not be aware? Like, if she knew Danny well enough to hang around him, how could she not be aware of the allegations, at least? That doesn't seem to ring true. I guess she assumed Danny was innocent, at least initially, but then she found out more, and she withdrew her early support, and there's nothing to see. She did an early support with Danny, but that is it. She later was, quote, horrified to learn the truth, and really there's no real scandal here. Well, there's obviously a lot of problems. So she's addressing the support for Danny Masterson. So she's addressing the accusation by Chrissy Bixler and Cedric Bixler. And they currently have a lawsuit against the church, which has been delayed. I will do an update on that soon, but they are suing the church. I'm not denying Chrissy is a victim of Danny Masterson. However, when you look at some of the Jane Does and their stories about Danny, they're telling the truth in some cases and not telling the truth in others. And Danny deserves to be in jail, but there were certain things that happened during that court trial. Again, people don't want to hear this, so I understand I'm going to get a downvote, but it wasn't exactly what people think it is. It was not exactly a completely fair trial, and there were a lot of irregularities. I mean, a lot of them. And some of them are involving people we know, right? So if you're involved with anti-Scientology, you know that Aaron Smith Levin went to that trial and he got into a screaming fit, and that almost destroyed the case. So there's just a lot of myth making about the trial being the greatest trial, the most fair trial, yada, yada, yada. Listen, like it or not, on both sides, there was a lot of propaganda and a lot of fishy things happened. But I think Christie was victimized, and again, Danny has been convicted. In terms of the lawsuit, again, people don't want to hear this, but Cedric and her, they're not exactly telling the whole truth. And there's a lot of hypocrisy. I mean, a lot of hypocrisy going on. And I'll double check this, but when Chrissy was being confronted about Aaron's abuse of women and Aaron being violent towards women, apparently she's like, mind your own business. I don't care about all that. To just be consistent and to be fair to both sides. Yeah, do I believe Emily's really being what? Remorseful? No, I don't believe so. I think it's just what it is. Her handlers are telling her, okay, just put out a propaganda statement. We're condemning Danny. We're not addressing Scientology. So her affiliation with Scientology and its abuses, she's not getting into that. She's also not really addressing Cedric or Chrissy. She's not apologizing to them. So she's acting like she doesn't know them. But again, if you knew Danny back in the day, Chrissy was his girlfriend and they know one another. He was into that LA Hollywood music scene. I mean, to give her a lot of credit, Laura FM admitted, yeah, I knew Danny. We went to clubs together. So again, if you were into the Scientology Hollywood scene, these people know one another. So I have little doubt that Serge Del Mar, as he calls himself now, really Serge Gill, I'm sure he does know Danny. Lara, at least, was honest enough to admit, yes, we have a relationship. I went to that restaurant. We went to clubs together. These people know one another. So it's very hard to believe Emily does not really know Danny or was not aware of his crimes. She just didn't care. Like, he's a fellow Scientologist. They're going to protect one another. Nevertheless, I do think this is very fascinating and very interesting and powerful because it does seem the church is slightly changing, right? It's cynical. Apparently, they are willing to condemn Danny, but that's about it. And we don't know where Danny is now. Is he still a church member? There are rumors that he's been declared a suppressive person, which, if you know church ideology, means he is no longer in the church. Church members cannot help him. Church members cannot associate with him. However, we don't know that. So is he still being helped by Scientology? We don't know that either. It's just a lot of unknown unknowns in this entire case. So do I believe Emily? No, I really don't. But I understand under pressure, I'm sure the Linkin Park people and her had a communication, said, well, what is this thing? What is going on here? And she, quote, clarified. So at this point, she's officially condemning Danny Masterson. But are those her real feelings? I don't know. And she's officially condemning violence against women and abuse against women. But the church has a long history of that. Again, we can't forget Lisa McPherson. By any standard, that is a victim of abuse. She's the victim of violence. They literally, coercively, forcibly kept her in basically a prison in one of their buildings. And when she was nearly dead, they, quote, tried to get her to a hospital, but let her die because they only wanted her to be treated by a Scientology doctor. It's really hard to believe that Emily is not aware of the scandals or the crimes of the church, but if she is a completely ideological person, then she probably presumably doesn't really care about those victims. So it's just very hard to believe she's not aware of these crimes or scandals because, again, we have now so many documentaries, so many news reports. How could she not be aware? It's just very hard to believe. However, this story is just coming off the presses. I don't know Emily's record that much. I've tried looking it up, even looking at her up in terms of Scientology. We just don't know very much. So it's an ongoing story. So we have to find out a lot more about what kind of Scientology she does. Is she willing to leave the official church? Is she willing to become an independent Scientologist? Does she even care about Scientology? Was she pressured into it? A lot of question marks. Did she take advantage of slave labor? Is she aware that they use slave labor? Is she aware of these other crimes against people? Why did she put this message in terms of women? Do men not count? It's a lot of question marks. So she's addressing one major controversy, the Danny Masterson one, but these other controversies in terms of homophobia, past crimes, current crimes, past scandals, current scandals with the church, she's not really addressing it at all. It just feels like what it feels like. It's a PR statement to do damage control. I don't like Chrissy Bixler. I think she's a hypocrite, but she is a victim. So she has her own agenda. Calling out Emily is fine, but people have to wake up and realize this is kind of again, what it is. It's a brutal fight over money and power. I hope Chrissy Bixler does win the lawsuit because I don't care about Danny. But again, two things can be true: that Danny Masterson is guilty and he's definitely a monster. But the people attacking him as well as supporting him, they're unfortunately not much better. Unfortunately, that is where we are.